And now for a news story you may have missed. From Winston-Salem, North Carolina comes the true story of a hero, 89-year-old veteran James Brown. Not the singer James Brown, another James Brown. The word hero is overused these days. When the word hero is overused, it loses its meaning, its importance. But you'll soon find out that Mr. Brown is entirely worthy of the title hero. Mr. Brown joined the Army on July the 12th, 1950. The Korean War officially began on June 25th, 1950, a little over 2 weeks prior to Mr. Brown's enlistment. Mr. Brown followed in his brother's footsteps and enlisted. He was determined to do his part for America. In March of 1952, Mr. Brown's unit, the 45th Infantry Division, was sent to the front lines. Mr. Brown earned a Combat Infantryman badge for engaging the enemy. Mr. Brown's unit was rare in that it was racially integrated. Mr. Brown is a black man, but war knows no color. While on a night patrol on June the 22nd, 1952, his platoon crossed the line of demarcation and walked through a low grassland area. Mr. Brown was the point man for his unit, meaning he was the lead man in a diamond-shaped formation. Suddenly, Mr. Brown's unit came under enemy mortar fire. Shrapnel from an enemy grenade shredded one of his arms and one of his legs. Mr. Brown spent 57 days in a hospital in Osaka, Japan, recovering from these wounds. When the Army decided he was sufficiently healed, he returned to his unit and to the battlefield. Because Mr. Brown was wounded as a result of enemy action, he was set to receive the Purple Heart Medal. Then one day, Mr. Brown and his platoon leader got into a heated discussion. An all-out argument ensued over a tactical safety concern. Mr. Brown raised concerns with his platoon leader over decisions he thought put his fellow soldiers' lives at risk, unnecessary risk. Well, you know who won that argument. Mr. Brown was outranked. He requested permission to speak with company-level leadership to report the dangerous situation, but his request was denied. Mr. Brown was determined to do what he thought was right. Despite the denied request, Mr. Brown walked 18 steps in the direction of his company commander. 18 steps. Mr. Brown was subjected to racial slurs and arrested on charge of disobedience of a superior commissioned officer and cowardly conduct before the enemy. His superiors held a 30-minute trial for Mr. Brown in a tent right there on the battlefield. Mr. Brown was court-martialed, dishonorably discharged, the Purple Heart status was removed, and Mr. Brown was sentenced to serve 5 years in the brig. The cowardly conduct charge was dismissed on appeal. Mr. Brown said, "At the time that this incident took place, I felt that I was making the right decision." Mr. Brown's dishonorable discharge followed him for decades. The negative connotation of dishonorable discharge, in addition to his being a black man in the 60s, made getting a good job nearly impossible. He attempted to clear his name, but failed time after time. Then Mr. Brown learned about the Veterans Legal Clinic at Wake Forest School of Law, a group of lawyers who work with former soldiers to correct injustices in their military records. Eleanor Morales, the director of the legal clinic, and students Ashley Willard and William Crotty spent a full academic year on Mr. Brown's case. Finally, in a 700-page petition filled with evidence, they argued that his dishonorable discharge was truly fueled in part by racism. Ms. Morales and the students forwarded the petition to the Army Board of Correction of Military Records and waited. Months passed. Finally, the Veterans Legal Clinic received a letter from the Army Board. Ms. Morales took a deep breath and read the letter. But the news was good. After struggling with dishonor for 70 years, the Army Board approved the petition and restored Mr. Brown's veteran status and his Purple Heart. Mr. Brown received his Purple Heart in a Veterans Day celebration held this past Friday. I've been exonerated from a burden that I carried for 70 years, he said. I am very happy today to be sitting before you knowing that my country has recognized me. Well, Mr. Brown, we are certainly recognizing you now. Thank you for your service. You are a true hero.